Welcome. My name is Clark Korb. I'm a holistic health practitioner, and today I will be discussing the concept of personal power, how to recognize when our personal power may be compromised or limited, and what we can do to reclaim it. So first off, what does it mean to be in your personal power? I'm going to use the definition that makes the most sense to me, and that is being in the fullest expression of your most authentic self. That is the fullest expression of your most authentic self. So what does this mean? Not getting in your way, not sabotaging yourself, allowing abundance to flow through you in all ways. This is really a basic law of prosperity, allowing your mental, your physical, your emotional faculties to be at their prime operating level, being well connected spiritually, letting financial and material resources flow to and through you. Another way, simply just letting your light shine. When you're letting your light shine, you feel free, you feel light, people feel your light, that lightness. Life feels fun and more engaging. It's also a state that allows you to invite maximum creative inspiration. If you're an artist or a creative person, it allows more of the muse to speak to you. There's also a physical component of being in your personal power that was voiced so well by Tom Brady. I stumbled across a video on YouTube where Tom Video was explaining how to throw a football. And if there's anyone who would have expertise in this, it would be Tom Brady. And what fascinated me most about this, I don't play football, never have. I certainly enjoy watching, but I'm not an ultra avid football fan. But I thought if Tom Brady is teaching how to throw football, I'm interested in seeing what someone of his expertise has to say. And what was most fascinating to me is in this video, he describes that he generates power from the ground through his legs, and the whole purpose of his upper body is to transmit this kinetic energy through the ball with minimal loss. I'm paraphrasing, but my internalization of this. And what I thought was so great about that is he's directly acknowledging that it isn't about him powering through or efforting energy into the ball. In fact, his goal is to channel powers, in a sense, from the ground through his legs and letting his body get out of the way as absolutely much as possible and just directing that energy from the earth through the ball. I thought that was fascinating. It's very on point with what I mentioned in the grounding video earlier about tapping into that, and certainly check out that video if you haven't done so already. I'll put a link in the description below. So another component of this being in personal power that seems clear to me is when you're relying on your self-internal valuation without requiring external validation. So in other words, you're not relying on some external measure to say whether you are of value or not. And it's super easy to go down that rabbit hole, professionally, interpersonally, that sort of thing. This is especially challenging for anyone who is controlled by an excessive ego. So if someone is insecure, they define themselves by what they do, what their degree is, their title at work, that sort of thing, how many likes they get on social media. Of course, this doesn't apply here. Please be sure to like this video. Kidding aside, not kidding about liking the video, but I don't derive my self-worth from how many likes are on my video. So when your worth is defined by external measures, this is another place that shows up as people whose performance is judged subjectively. So artists, for example, or athletes in a competition where they're given a score literally by a judge, you're being judged, or in a dance competition, or some art contest where you have first, second, third prize, these kinds of things where your value is subjective from the observer. Also, those of us who've ever dated, it's real easy to feel the sense that your worth is defined by the person sitting across the table from you or that you're in a relationship with. If you feel like you're not being valued by them, it's real easy to not feel valuable. Such a tough thing when you're not in your own power that way. So we're going to talk about that and how to change those things. Just for clarity, too, to define here what's not power is any attempt or energy behind dominating or cutting down or belittling or destroying others to feel powerful. That's such a false and inaccurate sense of power. Or also behaving in a way that's intended to impress someone by manipulation or duplicity. Often this is the fake it till you make it kind of thing. This is not acting from power. In fact, it's acting from significant weakness, trying to masquerade as powerful. So how does limited personal power manifest itself? How do you know that your personal power is likely not as high as it could be? Right off the bat, you often feel disconnected from your own authentic voice. You might feel like you have to appease others or overly accommodate them, not in a reasonable sense, but go out of your way to make everyone else feel good while you suffer. Or in the most extreme case, to be the savior. the savior complex kind of thing. These are both very codependent types of behaviors. The need to tiptoe or walk on eggshells around people, we use those phrases. Coming from a fear of rejection or fear of retribution in either professional or personal context. Also, having compromised boundaries, like you've set a boundary and you haven't been able to enforce it. I talked about that in an earlier video. Feel free to reference that if you haven't seen that already. If you're not in your personal power, it can also you might feel easily rattled by external circumstances over which you have no control. Your personal power might also be compromised if there are some unresolved or suppressed traumas, whether they're mental, emotional, or physical, that you have. And to sum this all up from the wounding perspective or unresolved trauma, there's ultimately a belief in scarcity that we form. A belief in scarcity in any number of ways this can show up, as if there's no other job, no other employer, no other relationship, no other source of income, you name it. Overall, feeling like you have a general lack of options, that's the key thing. Feeling like you're stuck. Do you feel completely disempowered if you're stuck? So how do you reclaim your power and move forward from this? First and foremost, having awareness that you are limiting or not allowing your power to flow. If you recognize any of the above patterns or situations that I described, if that's kind of in play for you, that's a hint that you're not operating from your greatest personal power. It's super helpful, I've found, to identify past relationships or instances where you participated in a similar dynamic. And again, this can be interpersonal or professional at work, that kind of thing. And once you recognize this pattern in one or more instances, you need to take it on faith that this results from very likely an emotional wound or an imprint that you have, and it's not necessarily who you are. In fact, it absolutely is not the entirety of who you are. This behavior is coming from an emotional wound or an imprint that you had early in life. Oftentimes, these wounds have roots from codependence. So let's talk about codependence a little bit for a moment. This is a relationship between the enabled and the enabler. This can be characterized by someone with an excessive emotional or psychological reliance on a partner, typically where someone needs an excessive amount of support stemming from an illness or addiction. This can be kind of the savior complex sort of thing, or it can stem from a personal relationship where someone with a very low self-esteem and a strong desire for approval has an unhealthy attachment to someone else who is particularly manipulative or controlling. This would be exemplified by the appeaser-narcissist pairing, the appeaser that has a low self-esteem and the narcissist that's manipulative and controlling. Ultimately, the wound that gets received from this is that love or acceptance is highly conditional and is based on your performance, that the appeaser performs to the narcissist's pleasure, if you will. It's kind of like pairing someone with a bottomless bucket of needs that can't be filled ever with someone else who feels like they have to endlessly try to fill a bucket in order to be loved. That's a very fitting match. Not a healthy one, but it's a very fitting match. It's also kind of like the concept of two halves that need each other versus two whole beings sharing a life with one another. So in this particular context, the narcissist is someone who has an unreasonably high sense of their own self-importance that often masks a fragile self-esteem. They lack empathy or emotional intelligence and are often looking to blame others for everything and not taking responsibility on their own. This narcissist imprint or the appeaser imprint, either side of it, often stems from a relationship early on in life, and it can be repeated and often is repeated in one form or another until the pattern is resolved. So how do we go about healing your emotional wounds? So whether or not it's from this specific codependent type of example or any other emotional wounds, first of all, you have to recognize that your identity is not your wound. The wound is an imprint, it's an event or a series of events, but it is not who you really are. And ultimately, from this, you're relinquishing or you're changing that belief in scarcity, the need that you have to be approved by someone else or that you need to appease others to be loved or accepted. And in letting go of that, you have to take on the role of loving yourself unconditionally. And it might sound trite or overused, but it's really a profound thing, I believe. It's really taking responsibility for your own well-being. It's having that healthy selfishness where you put on your own oxygen mask first, emotionally, physically, mentally, those sorts of things. You established healthy boundaries to retrain others how to interact with you if necessary. And another key component that is certainly old wisdom from I'm certainly not making this up, but it's important to remember the power in forgiveness. And years ago, one of my friends and mentors gave me this mantra that she was taught in a course of how to practice forgiveness consciously. Now, keep in mind that forgiveness does not condone the behavior of someone who offended or wronged you in some way or wounded you in some way, but it's about you releasing the charge that you've been carrying around that wound. And this mantra that was shared with me, I think is fantastic, is I unconditionally forgive and release blank, whoever the person is. This person is free to go about his or her own path. Coupled with another statement, I unconditionally forgive and release myself for the role I played in the relationship with blank. I am free to go about my own path. And the exercise that was given to me was to write each of those sentences as many times as I needed to until I stopped feeling any internal charge or any internal emotion around it. And you can fill up pages in a notebook doing that. But what's great about that is it's not only letting the person, recognizing that the person is being released from your emotional charge, they're free to go about their own path, meaning you can't control them even if you wanted to, as it is. And you are also free to go about your own path and forgiving yourself for being in relationship or calling in or participating in that trauma-causing imprint. So forgiveness is super powerful. From that place of clarity where let's say you're relinquishing the belief in scarcity, you're applying forgiveness as much as you can possibly recognize, again, forgiving, not condoning, but just releasing charge, then you have a lot more space freed up to create your own new healthy environment. What would you like from that? Certainly filtering out additional noise, grounding yourself, feeding yourself positive information that's supportive of your own goals and intentions, not someone else's goals and intentions. Weeding out negative people or influences and cultivating supportive people and influences in your own community, in your own close circle. Mentors that are positive, whether they're authors you read, podcasts you listen to, YouTube channels you watch, or certainly close friends, family, people that have your best and highest good in mind. And it's also important from this, as you're doing so, to set and maintain boundaries for your own conditions of satisfaction in relationship, for any kind of relationship. Again, personal, professional, significant other. What are the conditions of satisfaction that are important for you? And design your boundaries accordingly. And when you have this cleaner, more supportive environment, it's much easier to maximize your focus that you place on your desired interests and intentions rather than by default or acting out someone else's desired interests and intentions. So what are some outcomes that you can notice for being more in your own power? What I've noticed personally is that it's much easier to detach from outcomes, especially those things, again, that you can't control. They're out of your realm of control. You detach from that by recognizing you're more focused on cultivating your own response ability to respond. You're not concerned with micromanaging external factors out of your control. You're also not as charged. You're not as triggered when people ask questions about what's going on. We're all human beings. We're all going to get charged. But as soon as you can recognize and ground yourself, the more frequently you do that, the more that you've embraced this sense of your personal power, you're much less triggered. This is really useful in a professional context if you're in sales, for example, and people have questions before completing a sale. Often let's say a more novice salesperson or someone without this perspective might feel like these sales questions or these objections are personal, that the salesperson takes them personally or they get frustrated, rather than coming from a place of, oh, this isn't about me, this is about this person's process in buying or not. So it's very helpful in a professional context. And when you release that futile desire to control the behavior of others, you're allowing yourself to be way more present. You're not trying to control them and recognizing that they can't control you, feeling like you have to fit a mold in that sense. You don't have to justify your presence or validate your presence. You're valid. You exist. You're much less concerned with worrying about how other people judge you. You're not seeking to impress or convince others. You can really embrace that take it or leave it mentality. And from that place, when you're no longer concerned about trying to curry favor with someone, you can be genuinely curious about them instead of how you are perceived by them. So in this case, it's not like you're formally being an interviewer, but you can be much more genuinely interested in what's going on for that person. Again, if you're in a professional context, if you're in sales and you're really asking questions about what's going on for the person you're talking to instead of trying to just push a product out the door, or when you're sitting at home with a loved one and you're wanting to know really what's going on for them and you ask how their day is and they just say fine. If you're not present, you can easily breeze through that. But if you are more present and you're not concerned about whether you're accepted, loved, valued, that sort of thing, you can really dig in a little deeper and ask a few more questions about, well, tell me more about what fine is like. So this works, again, in all relationships, business, professional, sales, interpersonal, that sort of thing. And I think last but not least, when you're coming from this place of personal power, you embrace peace more consistently. You feel far more comfortable in your own skin. You feel self-assured. You feel confident, not cocky, but confident in your own self-direction. You gain an increased clarity of perspective, the kind of that 30,000-foot view. You have a better idea, since you've examined and renegotiated for yourself, if needed, boundaries, clarity in your direction, and you really focus more on what matters and don't sweat the small stuff, so to speak. And I believe ultimately this allows us to move with more power, more ease, more grace, rather than force or excessive effort in life, in everything that we do. What about this resonates with you? Let me know in the comments below. If you found some value in what I've discussed today, I would appreciate you giving this video a like and clicking on the subscribe button with notifications set to all in order to avoid missing future posts. Also, if you know of anyone who may benefit from what I've shared here, please forward this video to them. These small actions take just moments to do, they cost nothing, and yet they really help support the growth of the channel. Thank you for tuning in.